Chapter 5. Erlit sees him out, but at the entrance to the parlor they run into a hunter who arrived after the others. It's Guerrero Irola, a man he knows well. Guerrero Irola used to provide the plant with head. His is one of the largest breeding centers, but over time he began sending Craig sick and violent head. He'd be late with orders and would inject the product with experimental drugs to tenderize the meat. He hasn't ordered head from the breeding center since then because ultimately the meat was low grade and he grew tired of the dismissive way things were handled, of never being able to speak to Guerrero Irola directly or having to go through 3 secretaries to talk to the man for less than 5 minutes. Marcos Tejo, how are you doing, man? It's been forever. I'm doing well, very well. Erlit, this gentleman is sitting down for a meal with us, no discussion. Guerrero Irola says in a mix of Spanish and stilted English. As you wish, Erlit says and nods slightly. Then he gestures to one of the assistants and says something in his ear. Join us for lunch. The hunt was pretty spectacular. Guerrero Irola says, switching to English again. We all want to try Ulysses Vox. Right, that's the name of the rock star who had gone into debt, he thinks. The possibility of eating the man seems aberrant to him. And he says, I have a long trip home. No discussion, Guerrero Irola repeats in English. For old time's sake, since I hope they'll return. He knows that being taken off the list of providers didn't make much of a difference to the man, at least not economically. After all, Guerrero Irola Breeding Center provides half the country with head and exports a huge volume of product. But he also knows that the center took a hit in terms of prestige because the Craig processing plant is the most reputable in the business. But there's a rule that's never broken. Stay on good terms with the providers, even this one who exasperates him with the mix of Spanish and English he uses to show his roots, so that everyone knows he went to private bilingual schools and that he comes from a long line of breeders, first of animals and now of humans. One never knows if they'll have to do business with someone like him again. Erlit doesn't give him a chance to answer and says, Of course, the Cavalier will be delighted to join us. My assistants are adding a plate to the table. Great, Guerrero Irola says in English, then continues in Spanish. And I imagine that you, sir, will be joining as well? It will be an honor, Erlit says. They step into the parlor where the hunters are seated in high-backed leather armchairs, smoking cigars. They've already taken off their boots and vests, and the assistants give them jackets and ties for lunch. The assistant rings a bell and they all get up and move to the dining room, where a table has been set with dinnerware from England, silver knives, crystal glasses. The napkins are embroidered with the game reserve's initials. The chairs have seats of red velvet, and the candelabras have been lit. Before he enters the dining room, he's asked to follow an assistant. The man hands him a jacket to try on and a matching tie. He thinks all the preparations are ridiculous, but he has to respect Erlit's rules. When he enters the dining room, the hunters look at him with surprise, as though he were an intruder. But Guerrero Irola introduces him. This is Marcos Tejo, the right-hand man at Craig Processing Plant. This guy's one of the most knowledgeable in the business, Guerrero Irola says, switching to English again. He's the most respected and most demanding. He'd never introduce himself this way to anyone. If he had to honestly tell others who he was, he'd say, This is Marcos Tejo, a man whose son died and who moves through his life with a hole in his chest, a man who's married to a broken woman. This man slaughters humans because he needs to support his father, who's lost his mind, is locked up in a nursing room, and doesn't recognize him. He's going to have a child with a female specimen, one of the most serious crimes a person can commit, but he doesn't care in the slightest, and the child is going to be his. The hunters greet him, and Guerrero Irola tells him to take a seat by his side. He needs to be on his way home. The trip is going to take several hours, but he glances at his phone and sees that Jasmine is sleeping and relaxes. The assistants serve fennel and anise soup followed by a starter of fingers in a sherry reduction with candied vegetables. But they don't use the Spanish word for fingers. They say fresh fingers in English, as if doing so could disguise the fact that what's being served are fingers of several humans who were breathing a few hours ago. Guerrero Irola is talking about the Lulu Cabaret. He's using code words because it's known that the place is a city club involved in human trafficking, with one minor difference. After paying for sex, a client can also pay to eat the woman he slept with. It's extremely pricey, but the option exists, even if it's illegal. Everyone is involved. Politicians, the police, judges, each takes their cut because human trafficking has gone from being the third largest industry to the first. Only a few of the women are eaten, but from time to time it happens. That's what Guerrero Irola tells them, emphasizing in English that he paid billions for a stunning blonde who drove him wild, and afterwards he of course had to take things further. The hunters laugh and clink their glasses, celebrating his decision. How was she? One of the youngest hunters ask him. Guerrero Irola can only raise his fingers to his mouth in a gesture indicating that she was tasty. No one can admit it in public that they've eaten a person with a first and last name, except in the case of a musician who gave his consent. But Guerrero Irola hints at it to show Krieg's right-hand man he's got money to pay for it. That's why Guerrero Irola invited him to lunch, to rub his face in it. He hears one of the hunters, who's sitting close by, whisper to another that the stunning blonde was in fact a young virgin of 14 who needed to be tenderized, and that Guerrero Irola destroyed her in bed, raping her for hours. The man says he was there and that the child was half dead when they took her away to be slaughtered. It occurs to him that in this case, the flesh trade is literal, and he's disgusted. While he thinks about this, he tries to eat the candied vegetables, avoiding the fingers that have been cut into small pieces. He's sitting next to Erlit, and the man looks at him and says into his ear, "You have to respect what's being served, Cavalier. Every dish contains death. Think of it as a sacrifice that some have made for others." Erlit's nails graze his hand again and his shoulders. He thinks he can hear the scratching under the man's skin, the contained wail, the presence that wants to get out. He swallows the fresh fingers because he wants this to be over with, to leave as quickly as possible. Erlit's false theories are not something he cares to argue about. He's not going to tell the man that sacrifice generally requires consent from the person being sacrificed, nor will he comment that everything contains death, not just this dish, and that he, Erlit, is also dying of every second that passes, like all of them. To his surprise, the fingers are exquisite. He realizes how much he misses eating meat. The assistant brings out a single plate and serves it to the hunters who killed the musician. Solemnly, the assistant says, "The tongue of Ulysses Vox marinated in fine herbs, served over kimchi and lemon-dressed potatoes." They all applaud and laugh. Someone says, "It's a privilege to eat Ulysses' tongue. You'll have to sing one of his songs afterwards, so we can see if you sound like him." They all burst into laughter except for him. He doesn't laugh. The rest of the diners are served the heart, eyes, kidneys, and buttocks. Ulysses Vox's penis is placed in front of Guerrero Irola, who requested it. "Looks like he had a big one," Guerrero Irola says. "What are you, a fag now? Eating a dick?" one of the hunters says to him. They all laugh. "No, it makes me more potent sexually. It's an aphrodisiac," Guerrero Irola answers seriously, and looks with contempt at the man who called him a fag. They all go quiet. No one wants to contradict him because he's a man with a lot of power. To change the subject and release the tension, someone asks, "What's this we're eating, this kimchi?" There's silence. No one knows what kimchi is, not even Guerrero Irola, a man who's had some education, who's traveled the road, who speaks different languages. Erlit does a very good job of hiding his displeasure at dining with the uncultured, unrefined people that surround him. But he doesn't hide it completely. There's a hint of disdain in his voice when he answers, "Kimchi is a food prepared with vegetables that have been fermented for 1 month. It's Korean in origin. The benefits are numerous, among them that it's a probiotic, Nothing but the best for my guest. We're getting probiotics from all the hard drugs Ulysses injected, one of them says, and they all laugh loudly. Erlet doesn't respond, just regards them with a half smile stuck on his face. He looks at Erlet and knows that the entity, whatever it is that's in there, scratching at the man's skin from the inside, wants to howl and slice through the air with a sharp cutting wail. Guerrero Irola gives them a look that restores order and asks a question. How was Ulysses Vox hunted? I caught him off guard in what appeared to be a hiding spot. He had the bad luck of moving just as I walked by, the hunter says. Right, with your bionic ear no one gets away, says the man who shot the pregnant female. Lisandrito is a master, Guerrero Irola says, the last word in English. Like all the Nunez Guevaras, the family's got the best hunters in the country. He points his fork full of flesh to the hunter and says, next time Erlet has a celebrity for us, leave him for me, kid. There's a clear threat and Lisandrito lowers his eyes. Guerrero Irola raises his glass, and they all toast Lisandrito and his lineage of first-class hunters. How many days did he have left? Someone asked Erlet. Today was his last day. He had 5 hours left. They all applaud and clink their glasses. Except for him. He's thinking of Jasmine.